Hey Sopranos fans, welcome to another Machiavellian Monday here on Sopranos Street, and we are here today to take a look at Mr. Silvio
I was bald.
Dante. Sil is shown throughout the series to be an astute and loyal consigliere to Tony. His keen perception and intelligence make him incredibly effective at social maneuvering, predicting responses, and getting the people he wants in the places he wants them, all of which fit the stereotype of being Machiavellian. But Machiavellianism is much more specific than the general notion of being an effective schemer and that the ends justify the means. It's essentially a how-to-rule manual for current or aspiring leaders, detailing the most effective ways to deal with specific circumstances and different types of people based on Machiavelli's historical observations. So, how Machiavellian was Silvio Dante? Well, evaluating Sil in that context will be a little bit different due to the fact that he is a consigliere, and therefore his role isn't the same as a number 2 in Machiavelli's setup. In Machiavelli's system, the number 2 fills more of an underboss or capo type role, a stern or feared enforcer type who was completely loyal, similar to Emilio Della Croce of the Gambino family. So when evaluating Sil, after taking a second to address the problems he had during his stint as acting boss, as well as the ones he may have faced if Tony had died, I will be evaluating him in terms of being a boss, since their roles are somewhat similar, as well as take a look at the one simple thing he could have done that would have made his time at the top much simpler and more effective. As regular viewers of Machiavellian Monday know, I usually start out with discussing their level of boldness, for Machiavelli said that good fortune is a woman, a lover of men with the audacity to command her, and that may have seemed to be his biggest problem as acting boss. He was not bold enough to get people to accept what he said and leave him alone.
Walk down. Let me think. Mornings are better. I'll come up with a solution. I don't want you having to worry about it.
Okay.
What's going on? Would you move your car, please, sir? Sil, I didn't hear from you.
Even though his solution was temporary, it's easy to say he wasn't bold enough to tell Bobby that's how it is until I say otherwise, and leave it at that. But boldness really wasn't Sil's problem. We will see Sil throughout the series call out Tony more effectively than anyone, and more frequently than anyone but Chris, who, in addition to being shielded by nepotism, was just kinda crazy like that.
Motherfucker!
But Sil's real problem from a Machiavellian standpoint was that he didn't act in the spirit of the times. Machiavelli then goes on to express that it is often hard to get successful people to adjust because they've been so successful by using their previous methods, and Sal had been successful largely due to his ability to be more of a diplomatic figure rather than the decisive leader that Tony was. It isn't to say that he couldn't have been if given the time to adjust, but in that moment he was definitely out of his element. This would have also led to the problem he would have faced if Tony had died, which was that people still viewed him in a milder and more diplomatic context than, say, Paulie or Chris. People would expect that from him moving forward, and, as Machiavelli expressed, it is much easier to be viewed as harsh and then go easier than it is to be viewed as more peaceful and then amp it up. This principle is seen when Junior becomes acting boss and begins his tirade, as opposed to Johnny Sack's rise. Though it's not a perfect parallel, people expected that from Johnny, so they moved on quickly, whereas Junior's reign of terror came out of nowhere, and so people resented it. Sil might have faced similar problems as boss in that any escalation in aggression would seem so out of character that it would draw undue attention.
This aggression will not stand, man.
Ironically, while his diplomatic image may have hurt him as a boss if he didn't take the step we'll get to later, the reasons why he was so good in that capacity are also the reasons why he has the potential to be an incredibly effective boss from a Machiavellian standpoint. According to Machiavelli, a good prince is a constant inquirer, a patient listener, conducts himself in a manner in which it appears he cannot be deceived, and if someone does lie, he calls them out on it. While we will get to that second part in a bit, that first part not only lends itself to his ability as a diplomatic type, but it also lines him up with one of the fundamentals of being a Machiavellian leader, which is that even during times of peace, a prince should be in constant search of resources. In the Mafia, that means information and money, and Sil is short on neither. With Sil, information comes in two main forms: knowledge of the rules and word on the street type info. We will start with knowledge of the rules, for Machiavelli states that he who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation, and Sill's knowledge of the rules, as well as his willingness to implement them evenly, is best shown through Ralph Cifaretto. Ralph Cifaretto was one of the most universally disliked members of their family, and he met his untimely demise due to a dead horse. Despite having some common ground with Ralphie,
Hey, look at you!
Sill doesn't care for Ralphie either, but that doesn't stop him from applying the rules evenly and in line with Machiavellian principles. After he beat Tracy to death in the parking lot of the Bing, Tony hit him. As much as it may seem like he deserved it, which was essentially Tony's point, you can't hit a made guy for that, and Sill called him out on it.
He bashed that poor girl's brains in. I hear you. I know. It was a tragedy. The fact is, though, she was not related to you by blood or marriage. She was not your gumad. Ralphie's a made guy, Tone. All things considered, he's got a legitimate beef.
Sill's breakdown of Tony's options in this situation also fall directly in line with Machiavellian principle, which states that people should either be treated well or crushed.
Make him disappear or make nice. You only got two choices.
But as nice as his knowledge of the rules is, his real value lies in his ability to get street info quicker than almost anyone else on the show. This is seen even from the pilot episode, where he is one of the first to know that Artie's restaurant will be used for a hit. Now maybe that's because Sill's spidey sense was tingling due to some connection he had with Artie. But more than likely, it was through all the connections he had with people willing to talk around him due to his diplomatic reputation. That wouldn't be his only source of info, however, for as the old saying goes, if you want to know what's happening, follow the money. And even back through the Many Saints of Newark days, Sill always seems to be the one counting the money. He knows more about it than even Tony, who really only cares about what goes in his own pocket, and rumor has it that Sill even knows where Junior's share of the Bohax Haul from the 70s is buried, but he won't tell anyone.
I heard there's a treasure map under here.
Whatever the combination of his sources may be, the end result is a man with his finger on the pulse of the organization like no one else, and this would allow Sill to achieve two Machiavellian necessities for a leader, the first of which is keeping your eye on troop morale. This is seen in instances such as the Vito and Tony B situations, where Sill conveys the mood to Tony. It also allows him to fulfill the other Machiavellian principle that we were talking about earlier, which is to conduct yourself in a way that people believe that you can't be fooled. He shows this best, again, with Ralphie, when discussing the Jackie Jr. situation.
And B, I'm gonna give that little fuck our Mats, he'll never forget. As soon as we can locate him.
He's in that housing project in fucking Booton.
This combination of instinct, information, and diplomatic reputation puts Sill in prime position to be both the lion and the fox, an analogy which even Carlo Gambino is known to have acknowledged as being ideal for a boss. This dynamic is best exemplified in the Burt Gervaisi situation. Sill's generally calm demeanor and reputation allows him to avoid a potential snare because Burt feels comfortable approaching him about it. He was probably expecting, at worst, a response similar to Albert Barisi's response to Richie about flipping on Tony. Something very Fox-like and non-committal, or perhaps an outright rejection, but he also expected to be able to walk away from the meeting like Richie did. Instead, he was introduced to Sill the Lion.
I talked to some of the guys about your misgivings.
Yeah?
In addition to being able to pull off that type of maneuvering, Machiavellian strategy dictates that a prince ought to entertain the people with festivals and spectacles at convenient seasons of the year. While his participation in the Columbus Day Parade may not have gone well, Sill does show a knack for entertaining through the Bing, his card games, and his Pacino impression.
So, cheer me up, babe. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Quick side note, this line has such an interesting dynamic when taken from a Machiavellian mafia context. Machiavelli expresses that theft is a slippery slope because once you start living off it, reasons to do it become easier to come by, which would make it increasingly hard to stop. Anyways, with all these things going for Sill, he should have had an easier time as acting boss and eventually boss if Tony would have died. After all, as Machiavelli expressed, when dealing with an area with long-standing aristocratic families, which would be similar to the mob, one only needs to deal with potential problems quickly and not rock the boat, and Sil wasn't a boat rocker. So what was the one thing he could have done that would have set him up to be an almost textbook Machiavellian boss? Establish a stern buffer, a Machiavellian-style number 2 like Emilio Della Croce. In this capacity, Paulie Walnuts would have worked quite well. While Paulie is no Della Croce, he would allow Sil to step back from controversy. With complete support from upstairs, Paulie would be an unyielding presence, and due to his reputation, any actions that may be viewed as harsh would probably be attributed to him. On the other side of that coin, things that people liked that came down from upstairs would probably be attributed to Sil due to his reputation. A perfect Machiavellian setup. So thanks for watching this Machiavellian Monday here on Soprano Street. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.